So while I am sad and trying to cope, I'll be honest, I am angry. I am angry with the world that allowed the dehumanization of Israelis and sanitized the terrorism of Hamas. I must say, I love this show and I love this network, but I've got to ask, who is writing the scripts? Hamas, the people who did this, they are not fighters, Jonathan. They are not militants. And I'm looking right at the camera. They are terrorists. It is a barbarian who rapes and brutalizes women, who kills children in front of their parents, and then brings them over to Gaza, who literally, we've heard all these reports, and we know these aren't just reports. These were filmed gleefully by the barbarians who committed these grotesque crimes. They filmed, for example, an elderly woman in her home in one of these towns. They burned her alive in her house because she was too infirm to take out. And, parading women, bleeding from the crotch because they were raped throughout Gaza while people hoot and holler and cheer. So look, when we say, oh, this was an escalation, it was bound to happen, I am sorry. This was a massacre that was pre-planned. This was not destined to happen. It is not normal to shoot teenagers in the back, hundreds of them. So I just think, guys, get the story right. And all these pictures of missiles or the rubble in Gaza, please talk to the Israeli mothers and fathers who lost their children. Talk to missiles or the rubble in Gaza. Please talk to the Israeli mothers and fathers who lost their children. Talk to the grandchildren whose grandparents were seized as hostages. And please stop calling this a retaliation. This is a defensive measure against an organization that is committed to one thing: killing Jews, not a peaceful resolution of a conflict, but murdering Jews. And if you're wondering if I'm exaggerating, please, I beg of you, everyone watching and everyone at this network, just watch the footage.
That, my friends, was one of the most woke leftist activists in the nation freaking out at one of the most woke leftist propaganda outlets, MSNBC, showing for all to see how the Hamas-Israel conflict is literally unraveling the left. We're going to see how the war in the Middle East has erupted into a massive clash inside the woke left, and why this clash is but the beginning of the woke's inevitable demise. You're not going to want to miss this. Hey, gang, it's me, Dr. Steve, your patriot professor. As you can see, back in the studio, here to help you to think better so you can feel better in these crazy and turbulent times. So make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. Also, if you would, make sure to share this video with friends and family. We are once again being throttled, unfortunately, by big tech, so I need your help to get the hopeful message of this channel out to as many people as possible. Also, gang, you need to click on that link below right now and learn how to stick it to the establishment by using their own corruption against them. And you know exactly what I'm talking about. Companies like BlackRock have been bribing corrupt politicians like Nancy Pelosi with insider trading secrets for decades now. They know a whole host of trading secrets that give them an unfair advantage when picking stocks. But did you know that thanks to a little known SEC database, well, guess what? We can have access to those very secrets as well. We get to see what stocks those corporate CEOs are buying up in real time, and then we get to piggyback on their trades to gain the same advantage for ourselves that Pelosi and the crooks in DC have. My friend Ross Givens has been tracking insider trading for years now, and his recommendations have led to investment returns of over 200%. Some have hit as high as nearly 1,500%, and now it's your turn. Click on that link below right now and learn how you too can learn to trade like Pelosi. Click on that link below and learn how to gain an insider advantage for yourself today. War, as we all know, has erupted in the Middle East, but that war, ironically, has devastating ramifications for the woke left here at home. On one side, you have the Palestinian sympathizers, such as Black Lives Matter. BLM has publicly announced their solidarity and support for the Palestinians. In fact, the Chicago chapter of BLM, they went even further. They posted a highly inflammatory image of their support for the Palestinian people, showing a glider symbol, which we all saw beginning the hostilities. BLM's official statement reads, quote, Black Lives Matter Grassroots stands in solidarity with our Palestinian family who are currently resisting 57 years of settler colonialism and apartheid. As Black people continue the fight to end militarism and mass incarcerations in our own communities, let us understand the resistance in Palestine as an attempt to tear down the gates of the world's biggest open-air prison. As a radical Black organization grounded in abolitionist ideals, we see clear parallels between Black and Palestinian people. Yeah, well, they're radical to say the least. For her part, Representative Ilhan Omar, the darling of the woke left, actually went so far as to accuse Israel of war crimes in their retaliation against Hamas. And Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib has been pictured proudly displaying the Palestinian flag in front of her congressional office. So there you have it. The woke left is clearly on the side of the Palestinians. Or are they? While all of the sympathizing with Hamas is happening, you just saw, of course, none other than the president of the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, Jonathan Greenblatt, who many consider to be the king of woke cancel culture. He's been trying to shut down Elon Musk for months now. Well, he may want to rethink who his friends are. You heard what he had to say to his fellow leftists at MSNBC. Check out what he had to say to his fellow leftists in New York City.
I am sick and tired of it. And I am disgusted. Not just by the atrocities, although that's enough, but by their accomplices here in New York, marching in front of my office saying resistance. Let me tell you something. Rape is not resistance. Murder is not a political movement. And these people will end where evil always does, on the ashes of history.
So what's going on here? Why are we seeing nothing less than this full-blown civil war erupting inside the Democratic Party?
Wait till you see how he make the application. And we've been saying this. It's like, well, I'm going to let him say it. But it's spot on how he puts it.
Full-blown civil war erupting inside the Democratic Party, where each side is calling the other murderers and terrorists. Well, to understand why the modern left is unraveling, we just have to actually understand the significance of one word: victimhood. Victimhood, in many respects, is the ideology of the left. Rush Limbaugh used to say that all the time. The left is incessantly dedicated to turning people into victims. And that incessant victimology is rooted in the ideology known as cultural Marxism. Cultural Marxists deliberately attempt to bifurcate the world into two groups of people: victim groups and victimizer groups, right? Oppressed and oppressor. Here at home, this is how left-wing liberals have been rather successful in creating a coalition between LGBT activists on the one hand and Muslims on the other. Now, you would think that these two groups were completely antithetical to one another, particularly when it comes to sexual ethics, but not in the world of the cultural Marxists. You see, in the ideology of cultural Marxism, and this is absolutely key, you got to get this, both the LGBT community and the Muslim community share a common identity in that they are both the recipients historically of repression and discrimination in the West. And the key here is that they're both united by a shared identity of oppression. Now, here's the problem. Here's what we're seeing erupt right now within the woke left. What happens when one of those victim groups is no longer seen as a victim? What happens when the basis of commonality, victimhood, is lost? Well, what happens is that the solidarity between these often mutually exclusive groups collapses. It falls apart. And that's exactly what we're seeing happening inside the woke left right now as we speak. The ADL, which again is often seen as the default heresy hunter, the Grand Inquisitor on behalf of all things woke, being the first to accuse others of racism, sexism, bigotry, all kinds of phobia. Well, that very Grand Inquisitor, the woke heresy hunter, the ADL, is now turning its ire on the woke left itself, such as the left-wing activists at MSNBC.
Reality check. Reality check. It's just that the woke left was never about. Listen, when are we going to learn? And I think what happened with this whole debacle with like Bud Light and, Deland Mulvaney and so on, it teaches a number of things. It teaches a number of things. A lot of what the left is doing in favor of the minority is fake. Because as soon as it impacts them financially, they back off. BlackRock and all that stuff, back off. They're talking about, oh, we love the Jews, anti-Semitic. Kyrie Irving shared a link to a book and a movie. Oh my Lord, I can't believe. As soon as financially they backed off. And when it comes to elevating victimhood, they don't care. They will eat their very own. It's crazy what's going on. The world is too complex to be doing this. This is why you have to make a stand either for truth and error, right and wrong, God or the devil. It's that simple. It's that simple. It's not about which camp you belong in, which group. Like, you got to get out of this because that's not going to do anything for you. You got to stand for where the truth actually is. This doesn't necessarily mean you can be part of something. But don't become molded and shaped into that very thing. This is what the left is showing you. They were never about all of this stuff that they were talking about. They were never about that. Because it's all fake. It's always been fake.
Left-wing activists at MSNBC. So whether it's the pro-Palestinian side denouncing Israel as oppressive, or whether it's the ADL denouncing pro-Palestinian expressions as sympathizers with terrorists, the woke left is politically unraveling. And they're unraveling precisely because their connective tissue, which is a common identity of victimhood, is collapsing. Palestinian sympathizers are now seen by the ADL as nothing less than terrorist sympathizers. All the while, Israel and the ADL are seen as apologists for the continued oppression of the Palestinians. Either way, we could see the left unraveling precisely because their mutually recognized victim status is imploding. As it turns out, the world is simply too complicated to maintain a common identity so blatantly fabricated and manufactured for partisan purposes. And that is why the woke left, in the end, will itself eventually implode.
Exactly. I mean, he puts it well. If you notice, actually in the Bible, you just got to be careful with all these groups, right? Intersectionality is called. In the Bible, if you go into the scripture, one of the things that was happening in the scripture was this coming together in the days of Babylon under Nimrod. And I want you to notice like what God did. What God did here is a lesson. He didn't do this just to confuse anybody. He did it because he knew the danger of this. In chapter 11 of the book of Genesis, what we read is that the whole earth was of one language, of one speech. And it came to pass that they journeyed from the east, and they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. And they said to one another, go, let us make us brick and burn them thoroughly, that they had brick for stone and slime that had they for mother. So here's these people coming together. Even though we are so different and diverse in so many different ways, but there is this union here. It's a false union. It's a dangerous thing. It's a false union. This was so dangerous that God picked up on it because he understands something. Whenever humanity is coming together, whether it is under victimhood, under one political status, or there is one religious movement, however you want to unite this one world movement, that's kind of what the left is pushing for. When you listen to the idea of globalism and socialism, it's actually a one world kind of movement, one way of thinking about things. The reason this is bad is because it molds everybody in the group into this concept. There's a psychological term for this. It's called mass formation psychosis. By the way, that's what happened to us with COVID-19. Majority of the reasons why, the reasons why many of us did not raise a voice of protest, we've allowed this stuff to go so far, is because of mass formation psychosis. Is that we don't want to be outside of the group. We don't want to, it's the herd mentality, as it is also referred to. We want to make sure that everybody else is approving. I'm being approved and I'm approving. Right? I don't want to become a fish out of water here, for lack of term. So God saw this. He said, the people have one language, man. They are one. But this union is not a union in truth and righteousness. It's a union in rebellion. It's a false union. And God says, listen, they begin to do this, nothing will be restrained from them. Even God understands, even when there is a union of anything, any ideology, even if the union is false, it is still dangerous. He understands that. Because it doesn't allow anybody else to have a different perspective. And what's going on here was a suppression of the conscience. What was going on here is a one world religion. What was going on here was a one world political movement. What was going on here is a system that was being built to go against God. This is what is called Babylon. God knew this. He said, I'm going to come down and I'm going to confound their language. This is what he did, that they may not understand one another's speech. So God changed the perspective because he changed the language. It works better this way because we can learn from each other. It works better this way. This is why America is such a great country, man. Because what America actually represents is that here is a land where there is freedom. No matter who you are, where you're from, what your perspective is, whether you're an atheist, a Satanist, a believer, an unbeliever, a Christian, a Muslim, you can come to the United States and people get to work together despite their differences and influence one another with their ideology. Some of us will leave, go into this camp and that camp. It works better that way because once you have everybody thinking in one particular way, it oftentimes leads to rebellion against God. And eventually it also leads to persecution of a minority. That's what history has taught us. The woke left doesn't understand that this is exactly what they're doing whenever they're coming together and trying to unite and suppressing speech of anybody who disagree with them. By doing so, you are setting a stage for massive persecution. This is why the cancel culture is ridiculous. This is why all this stuff is going on. It's because they're trying to unite in their thinking. But the problem with that, humanity is so diverse. We are so different. God speaks to us in different ways, in different time. There's a lot happening in somebody's world. Today, you may be an atheist. Tomorrow, you may be a Christian. You just don't know where you're going to go in life. That diversity, the differences that is between us is actually a beautiful thing. It's actually a beautiful thing. Even the race, our skin color, our language, this is a beautiful thing. It's actually very divine. God wants that to be this way, because the power of influence is very much needed to bring about change in humanity. You influence me in one thing, whether that is good or evil, you influence me to do one thing. That level of influence is how God is able to get us from one place to another, eventually to the place where we can actually listen to his voice. It's a good thing. So the woke left, the reason they are wrong, again, they're eating each other up here, is because their ideology is based on misconceptions, dangerous, misleading conceptions. And that's why it doesn't work.